Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This week I'm back for a new video, and this time I have a video on Bochka kicks. So for this one I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks that I have for this kind of kicks. Don't forget to check out the project file in the link in the description, especially if you want to use the different tools and the framework that I'm going to show you. You can get also 20 kick samples that are made for free, and that sounds like this. Alright, now let's get into it, guys. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to show you the framework that I use, and inside of it, there's some different tools that you can use to make the Bochka effect. I'm going to use the framework that I did for my video on hard techno kicks and industrial kicks that I made last week. Check it out if you want to see how I did that, and especially I'm going to use the different samples that I made in that video. So I made some punches, some kick punches, industrial punches, processed rumbles, distorted punch, raw punches, and unprocessed rumbles. I show how I made that from scratch in that video, so check it out. And now I'm gonna use it in my framework. So for the framework, I'm going to use the same one, but I'm gonna add those Bochka effects. How is that framework made? Basically, I'm creating first a rumble kick that is focused on the lower and low mids frequencies. That is very distorted and compressed. And then I have on top of that a top kick. And all of this is glued together to make that kick punch. And with the Bochka effects, this is how it sounds. Why I did that? It's because usually when I glue together my lows and mids, this is extremely compressed and distorted, and I'm going to lose a bit of dynamic and transient. So I prefer to take out my top kick and put it on top, and then I just glue it together like mildly, and this is going to create my kick. So I'm gonna explain from bottom to top, and then I'm going to focus on the Bochka effects. So for this rumble kick, I'm gonna have first the rumble here. This one is especially focused on the sub. So at first it's unprocessed rumble, so it's this one. But this is going to be heavily distorted by the group processing that I have on top. So that's why you can hear all of this fuzz. But here I'm only taking the sub, and I make sure I don't have nasty frequencies, especially here at 200 Hz. This is going to be sidechain thanks to this fader, and I'm gonna make sure I have enough bass and I don't have too much sub on the whole group. So that's why I EQ like this, and also here for the resonances. This is going to be the punch. The punch is made of a clean punch, very simple here. This one is cut for the transient because the transient is going to be made here on the top kick. So this is just the mid and the lows. This is just a clean punch. This is going to be distorted here. And I sidechain to make sure I have only the punch and there's no overlap between those two elements. Altogether, this is heavily distorted, so that's why I put an Oxford inflator, a saturation, this does a lot of work, an OTT for compression, stage 1 for the wideness and utility to make sure my bass is in mono, bass low extender to make sure I don't have too much lows, especially when I change the different samples, it helps to control this, a final EQ. Usually you have lots of mud, as I told you here, 200 Hz, and just a final sus2 for the resonances, a transient shaper for the movement to make sure I still have some dynamic, attack, pump, sustain like this, and a clipper. This is going to be the staple of my kick. It's really like the power and the bass. And on top of that, I'm going to create a dynamic and the different layers to add some mid, some reverb, and so on with those Bochka effects. So for the top kick, I'm just stacking 3 different layers, a mid kick like this, which is a distorted punch. I can distort it more. If I want something more heavy, I can add more reverb if I want something more in the background or like a warehouse effect. But what is important here is compression. I make sure I have a punchy transient. I do the same here for another top. This one is more in the mids. Again, I'm using the same processing and I can use all of these to make something a bit harder or a bit cleaner, depending on what I want. And I have this layer, which is a punch, and all together it creates that punch. So without the Bochka effects, this is how it sounds. It's pretty clean. For now, it's just a rumble kick. Then I'm going to use those Bochka effects. So just before, let me show you the group processing on the end. It's lots of EQs. Usually when I make raw style, you want something a bit more punchy here in the mids. So that's why I created this EQ automation like this. I have a clipper. I have like here something to clean the mud, because usually I have a lot of mud here in this boxiness area. And overall balance, again, killing the resonances here. These different EQs is just to find a kind of equilibrium to sounds nice on my whole group, depending on the different samples that I use. I have a final mild distortion with low mix here and a final EQ and just a limiter at the end. And here, if I add my Bochka effects, you can hear the difference. I will add more mids. It's gonna fill up the kick. So I'm going to show you 3 different techniques to make that Bochka effect. But basically, the very first thing is adding reverb, and the Bochka effect is made out of a wumpy feeling of some reverb that is quickly changing from the top to bottom. It does that. So the trick is make an automation here with a bell curve, and you can create that effect. You can make it even more heavy if you want, depending on the amount. But basically, when you create that wumpy effect on the reverb, it's going to create that Bochka effect. You can make it with some reverb and this automation, or you can make it here with a rumble. So for instance, here I'm using rumble 4 and I'm using the reverb here, especially in the mids and low mids. And I'm creating this Bochka effect with that track, or with that EQ. So you can then stack up different samples to create more of that effect. So for instance, here I'm using the perk. Usually you can use some wooden perks, and that's going to feel more Bochka. Usually they use this kind of perk. You can add more reverb, you can add some delays. Also, this delay is going to create a Bochka effect. So here, this delay rack is basically a mix of a 1/16 delay, 1/8 or dotted 8s. And it's going to create also a rolling kind of reverby effect. You can do also more reverb on it. You can add more distortion. Here, for instance, I can use this distortion thing and add the delay rack. I can add also the reverb rack. And there you go, you have also that Bochka effect. You can use other type of perks. You can play with the pitch to get different resonances or frequencies for your Bochka effect. You can play with the delays, you can cut the 1/16s, for instance, or take only this one. Play with the different layers, add another one, change all the parameters from the different punches. So let's take, for instance, this one. I can change the pitch here. And there you go, I have another one. And you can also use these effects on the whole group. So for instance, here I made this Bochka effect, and basically I have my delay rack. Again, you can play with these, and I have the reverb rack here. So even without this, you can create that Bochka effect, and then you just have to boost it, add more distortion, and you can also create it from the group processing. So you can then have fun with all of these elements. You can use, for instance, some samples from your sample pack. I can use also directly my kicks, for instance. So let's cut this. So this is an example, and you can also use this rack to make any kick become a Bochka kick. So let's take this one. First thing first, I'm gonna just cut a bit of that high end in the transient, because usually the Bochka kick is more like narrow at first and it's not as bright. So I can cut this here with an automation, and then I'm gonna create this, and I made a Bochka rack. So this is a delay rack that I just show you. And the difference here is that this delay, I've put some more distortion, and I've put a sidechain like this to create that effect. So if I just isolate the delay, you get that feeling, and without any EQ, it sounds like this. I don't want the sub because I already have lots, and I just want to isolate the mids. I can change here the movement that I want. I can change also the delay that I want, and I'm gonna add some distortion to make this thing a bit more fat, and it's going to create a more industrial feeling. And there you go, you have your Bochka kick. You can add also some reverbs. Let's take back this reverb industrial. And I can also create again this effect with this frequency automation. Let's make it more down. And you can apply this to any kick. Of course, some kicks are going to work more than others. Let's take this one. So you can see how you can go from this kick to something more Bochka. Of course, it's better to use the framework and go from scratch to get something really like tailored to what you want to do. Especially here, you can change the perk to get something more dark. You can add and adjust the level of distortion that you want. And you can also use the different layers, change also the movement with the way the sidechain is, especially in the rumble, for instance. And you can just play around with lots of different stuff and samples to get your own Bochka kicks. So in a nutshell, how you want to make your Bochka effect: use reverb, use delay, create that bell EQ effect, and just stack this all together, add like a perk with some delay, and you can create this effect. You can also cut the transient to make it more narrow and dark, and with all of this, you can create from any rumble kick a Bochka kick. So I hope you guys liked it. Thank you guys so much for your support. Tell me what you think in the comments, and I see you in the next one. Ciao guys.